Hello, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning and afternoon, wherever you happen to be. I don't know these days when we get on a Zoom, whether you are in the building next door or Berlin. And next door happens to be San Francisco for me at the moment.
I actually think we have someone joining today from Dublin.
Ooh, that's a commitment.
It doesn't.
Hey guys, yeah. How's it going?
Hey.
No, I said I'd jump in. It's nice, it's only starting to get dark. It's all good.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing it early.
Yeah, no doubt. We happen to work with another team who's heavily based in Dublin, which is the Intercom recruiting team. They are, I think, primarily headquartered there, or at least have the company have a big recruiting presence there. So
yeah, they actually pulled all their jobs, well, 75 or 80 jobs out of San Francisco and brought them back to Dublin. So
oh wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Still trying to ping people out of there though.
Well, these days I think I might be the only person left in San Francisco, at least according to Twitter. The rage is all Miami, apparently, which is where I grew up, and at least my personal hot take is it's not all the rage. Right. I am just double checking to see who we've got here. I would love to know, before we dive in, kind of the makeup of the folks joining. It looks like we still have a handful of folks jumping in. So maybe if y'all are comfortable just chatting in your role at Reddit, it would help me get a little bit of a composition of who's on the call. I know we might have a mix of both recruiting, sourcing, coordinators, and so on.
I think this is mostly made up of sourcers and recruiters for today, both business and tech.
Okay, awesome. I think I just clicked a button that did some stuff that I've never seen before. So if I start going haywire, let me know. We still have a few folks jumping in. Awesome. So it looks like, cool, yeah. It's tech recruiters. I'm going to, thanks for the reminder, Dylan. I'm going to record this session for us today. So that way, if y'all want to reference this after, we will share the link and it will be referenceable. You can also share this to anybody else on the team. I believe this should be recording. Cool. Great. So I'm going to plan to kick off. It looks like most folks span recruiting, tech recruiting, and sourcing, as mentioned. So we'll focus on topics, of course, that are relevant to you all today. And as we go, I think the key piece here, or interest on our side, is making this time for you. So I have a bit of a plan and agenda that I'll walk through and overview before we dive in, and then open up space really for anybody to chime in with things that I might not have planned to cover that you might find value in covering. I think my kind of part of the conversation, or what I've queued up at least to start the conversation, may take about 30 minutes or so. And so we've got we should have a fair amount of buffer to open up space for open workshopping or Q&A, or perhaps new items that we want to add to the list. But on that note, I'm still adding some folks as they jump in here. Cool. Just catching up on the chat. Great. Hi, Jenna. So we have worked with the Reddit team for years in many different forms. So there are some familiar faces and lots of new faces as well. And so we'll kind of span some of the categories that we've kind of worked together on over time. And I'll share a little bit more about kind of our broadening product suite and how we might think about incorporating some of the new stuff that you all on the recruiting and sourcing team might not have much exposure to just yet. And we'll kind of touch on that quickly at the end of of the conversation. But here's our plan for today. Kind of really going to kind of talk about building data-driven campaigns. We'll pull some insights from our global data set, which is getting increasingly large. We're sending over 1 million emails per year or so now. And so we're starting to be able to pull out some trends that are more universal, at least for some period of time until everybody starts doing them, and then they don't work anymore. So we will share a bit of what we're learning about campaign structure and building a more data-driven set of campaigns. Starting off a little bit with like the high-level trends and shifts we're seeing in that data, and where the real challenges are for recruiting teams today in terms of both response rates and really building pipeline. And then lastly, I mentioned we'll touch on some of the new tools that we've been working on to impact and leverage some of these trends. And then hopefully, should there be particular curiosities that you all have and are coming in with, we can spend really as much time as needed on that stuff. But I'll stop here for a moment. I'm curious if one thing I heard coming into this call was it would be useful to understand how to interpret and make sense of some of the data for our given outreach campaigns. How might we kind of think about some of the numbers that are associated with the outreach we're doing and make change or improvements based on that? I'm curious, does anything else come up for folks now that was top of mind coming in as it relates to either resource or more broadly, your outbound prospecting workflow challenges, anything that might be helpful for us to try to touch on that I can kind of amend this agenda with?
I have a quick question. I think this is just me not using the tool correctly. Is there a way to lock it so that it defaults to your own campaigns instead of each time like clicking into it? And then also on the data, is there a way that when you're looking at insights that you can actually see more information without, how would I say this? Like, I feel like you almost have to click into each candidate to really see like more detail around like when they responded or to what they responded. But anyways, those are just two thoughts off the top of my head.
Yeah, sure. It sounds like the first one, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, is on the dashboard view, you want it to remember that you're inside of sort of my campaigns instead of switching out and coming back. Great. That's a great feature request, and it's probably something that's fairly easy. So Dylan, if you don't mind noting that. Also, I'm sorry, and I'm super rude. I did not introduce Dylan, who you all probably know more than you know me. He's joining us on the call. He leads support for Resource. You've probably chatted with him many a times. He is both real and he is awesome, and he is joining us on this call. Many people think he's like the smartest, most responsive bot ever because he responds so quickly, but I promise he's human and he is as good as you might experience him digitally.
That's what I was going to ask Troy. I was like, where's Dylan? Why isn't Dylan doing this?
Dylan is always joining me to just save face. So whenever I put my foot in my mouth, I've got Dylan here to save me. I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, okay, that's a great request. If there are any other requests like this, we have been getting a channel of requests through Andrew over time, and we've added things like tagging functionality that fits particularly the Reddit workflow from the Chrome extension and maps those tags to Greenhouse and other things. So we're very interested in hearing the small refinements or bigger issues that might make your lives easier. We'd love to build those and would very much welcome other suggestions. I'm not sure that I caught the second piece though.
Okay.
But
let me explain it because I just clicked into Resource so I could better explain what I was talking about. So when you click on your campaign, then you click on to Insights, you start to see bar graphs and like, who opened or like 8 opened or 8 clicked, but you don't actually see the detail without looking in another place to understand who opened it. So as a recruiter, right, you have your top 2 or 3 candidates you're dying to know, did they respond? Did they look at it? Is this the right email address? I feel like I'm clicking too many places to actually be able to see that, where it would be great if I could just, right from that view, go in to see all 8 who opened or all 8. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It sounds like you want a little more granularity on the specific campaign engagement.
Yeah.
another great suggestion. There might be, as we talk about guide, some of the newer tools that we've built, potential relevance there as well. So we'll perhaps come back to that towards the end of the conversation. Anything else that comes to mind for folks?
Yeah, Troy, one thing I want to bring up, and I know we talked about this earlier this week, but specifically is GDPR. Steve was on the call and he sits in Ireland. And I don't know if that's something where maybe we do have a separate conversation to kind of talk through that workflow to make sure we're all comfortable with how we're addressing it, as opposed to using today's time with so many people on the call. But just wanted to put that out there. I think we definitely need to address that.
Yeah, great point. We can, I could do a really quick stroke on that, since it's fairly, okay, I think, straightforward the way that we tend to process this. And then if there's anything else to dive into, we're happy to set up a sidebar about that. But at a high level, okay, we maintain full GDPR compliance as a processor, a data processor. And really, and I know we've shared this with the team before, but just to highlight, any candidate that requests data deletion, you can either forward that thread directly to privacy@resource.io. We will fully process that request. We will confirm with you, which you can pass back to the candidate. We have about a 14-day SLA on that. And then we usually do those quite quicker, is what I mean by about. The other option is to just offer the candidate that email address, privacy@resource.io. They could reach out directly and we will handle the request and the confirmation of the full erasure with the candidate directly. And then lastly, there's a feature that we can turn on for your account if you prefer, which enables you to put an unsubscribe link at the bottom of your emails automatically should a candidate want to opt out without further communicating with you. So those are the ways that we handle that.
Cool. And just one thing on top of that. So say, like, obviously the way it's integrated with Greenhouse. So that's my other side. So obviously it'll be deleted from resource.io, but then would we need to send a private one ourselves that they're now on our system?
So I believe Greenhouse is a specific feature for a GDPR flag. And if you go through that route, I believe we will automatically delete that as well. So another option here is a great point, is if you just go through Greenhouse's process, because we integrate so tightly with Greenhouse, we will run that erasure through our system as well if Greenhouse makes that deletion. Okay,
cool. We'll probably follow up with the Greenhouse people as well to see how we run that one. But yeah, that's
yeah.
Cool.
Take a look at their support docs. I remember reading through their announcement about this as well.
Okay,
cool.
Thank you.
Anything else top of mind for folks before we kind of dive in?
And a feature that I'm not sure if there is, but I haven't been able to find it, is being able to group campaigns together for the use of data. So say there's 3 of us reaching out via SRE, it would be nice to be able to pull that data into one source. So say like, hey, the team is working on SRE, and talk to a hiring manager and say, this is what the data looks like for that entire campaign across different sourcers.
Great. Okay, great. There is a way to do this with the Insights tab by just pulling the 3 campaigns that you want to see data for, and we'll aggregate the data across those 3. And perhaps if we get into the product later, we can kind of get a sense for whether or not that solution tackles the use case that you're talking about, and if not, what might be ideal. And then we can denote that stuff.
Sounds good.
Great. Cool. I will move forward, but I will say that, again, this time is really, it's designed for you all. So at any point, if something piques your interest to dive into further, we're happy to do that. And stop me at any point if new ideas arise that we can cover as we go through. So I think I introduced myself. My name is Troy. I'm one of the founders of Resource. I am quite an embarrassingly large geek around things like recruiting outreach. I will only tell that to a team like this. Otherwise, I will probably not be the one getting talked to at the party. I've spent time leading recruiting at a fast-growing startup called Grooveshark, which, if you were listening to music on the internet pre-Spotify days, you might know of. And then I spent some time at Google working on what we called hiring experimentation and running a number of experiments at Google's top of funnel around the data that relates to things like correlation between quality of resume and likelihood of hire for engineering roles and other fun projects. And then we started Resource in 2016 and have evolved a couple iterations from initially a sourcing consultancy and now to a outreach platform. And we're kind of shifting even more so into the world of the kind of full end-to-end candidate experience. A little bit about me. And I want to kind of share the real theme that is, if I had to distill our last 4 or 5 years of learning from watching some of the top recruiting teams do outreach and see results and watch the trends, this is probably the core trend that I would cite, and more or less where our company's thesis is shifting, which is that reaching candidates is no longer a challenge. It's really a matter of a click of a button with Resource, with something like Resource. And so these emails tend to get delivered. We're getting personalized messages into an inbox. We're getting follow-ups automated. So the challenge is really shifting, as we say, towards winning the candidate, not reaching the candidate. And so we want to spend a lot of our time letting the software do what software does best, which is kind of getting to the inbox of a candidate, and really focus our energy and efforts to the levers that we can move to increase the likelihood that the candidate engages, or I should say, the right candidate engages. And so I really want to kind of shape and frame our thinking in the vein of this trend. It's very sticky, at least for me, coming from the world of recruiting over the last 10 years, to really think that the majority of my problem, or the prime problem as it was in the past, was sifting through the dark corners of the internet and finding the right candidates. I will posit and maybe even challenge some of your intuitions in saying 99% of the candidates that you want to hire are readily available and very easily findable across websites like LinkedIn, GitHub, and AngelList. And so the challenge isn't really sort of turning over the last few rocks on the internet that nobody else has figured out, but rather figuring out how to more effectively engage the candidates you're already aware of. And this kind of makes your job pretty similar to a marketer's. And this is another way in which I'll try to challenge the framing and perhaps the identity as we think of ourselves like recruiters to be in service of some of the levers that we can move to impact our response rates and others. So as we know, there's a number of shifts happening in recruiting, but a big one or a symptom of it is rather that our jobs are really, candidates used to apply as the primary means of getting jobs. And in at least our market, candidates are not really seeking jobs, not as the prime channel for us. Rather, like, jobs are now seeking candidates, and we as recruiters represent those jobs. And so our job has shifted from largely an inbound world where we're screening or sifting stacks of resumes, if you will, or applications, to a world where we're actually strategically identifying candidates based on a few signals that we believe will be a great fit or are likely to be a great fit, and then actively and effectively persuading them about why that is. And this is really some fundamental marketing. And so I would say that the reason this is happening is largely just simple sort of economics. There's largely more demand for talent than there is supply. And so candidates are now, as a result, starting to drive the market and have been for a few years. And we believe this is increasingly happening, even amidst a global pandemic that's starting to challenge some of these power dynamics. Candidates, companies used to be the ones with optionality. We still have optionality as a company to select the best candidate, but candidates have significantly more optionality than they have in the past. And this makes assessment a two-way street. This means that at every touch point that you reach out to a candidate, the candidate is wondering, is this really the best option for me? Because I have many on offer, likely. And if they don't have them on offer, they know that they could quite easily. And so this is worth keeping in mind. And really what we're seeing move the needle for the most progressive and effective recruiting teams that we see really at the bleeding edge are companies that are challenging how early and how transparent they are with the things that are uniquely different about their company. And so the old way was, hey, candidate, we love your background. Let us, we're Reddit. we've raised from some of the world's best investors $100 million. I know you've raised a lot more than that. And are you interested in chatting? And now the challenge with this is that this isn't actually differentiated, right? If you open up TechCrunch this morning, there's probably $200 million Series C's announced in the last 24 hours from the who's who of investors, because they're all who's who according to them these days, right? So we want to start to get beyond these superficial markers and get at what are uniquely the different points or characteristics of our company. And I actually think this might be our mission, the impact we have on the world, our brand message, our values, our culture, our team, the people. And I think, you know, excitedly, Reddit is positioned better than most companies that I know, in my opinion, for most of the ways in which we see the market trending. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But if there were one, so this is a reiteration of what I just said. It's really about being different. It's not being better. Or in other words, different is better in the world of recruiting. You want to sort of stick out in the mind of the candidate and not necessarily kind of tit for tat the other companies. You really want to lean into what's authentic to you. Again, I think Reddit's sort of narrative and story plays well to this. But if there's really one takeaway for today, to sort of challenge yourself to think about some of the things we'll talk about, I'd love to challenge you to think of yourself as no longer a recruiter, but rather as a marketer. And this will play into a couple more points that we'll make here. So let's get into the actual campaigns and some of the things that y'all might be thinking about or wondering as for how to action some of this data. And you might challenge yourself furthermore to run one or so experiments this week, even if some of this challenges your intuitions. Largely because things are changing so fast, I just challenge you, like us, to try things that are a little outside of your comfort zone, even if you have a preconceived notion about it, to see what the results look like. And by all means, you know, go back to the norm if the results aren't there. One great example that I like to cite here is some time ago, we were working with the technical recruiting leaders of Stripe's technical recruiting organization. And they had a practice that we found to be highly counterintuitive for most recruiting teams we worked with. And that was this: they preferred to email candidates at their work email. And so they started all email campaigns to candidates' work emails. And their view, they had quite a bit of success. We can argue there are many variables that play into that, and this wasn't the sole reason. But I can say this: their view was this: we believe we're getting results because as engineers, our engineering team checks their work email way more than they check their personal email. They happen to sit with a tab open, most of them, on their work email all day long. And we're cleaning up because most recruiting teams are getting to the second best place behind InMail, which is, or sorry, the second best place behind work emails, which is personal, the third being InMail. And so they felt like further they could differentiate by landing in a place that has more visibility. And again, no one silver bullet will really sort of solve things here, but I can tell you that we have such strong intuitions among teams we work with in the opposite direction of that, that we have built features to serve our customers where you can turn off the ability to send emails if we don't find a personal email address. So even though we have a work email, and the data does show quite closely what Stripe suggested, in fact, the response rates are and interested rates are slightly less than personal emails in total. That's not to say if any one company runs to work emails, they would see better results, but they're significantly higher nonetheless than in-mail response rates. So many teams prefer to in-mail versus work email because they worry about sort of their brand and other things, but the results in the data just suggest otherwise. This is one example. Cool. So let me share a couple quick data points to frame this stuff up. So this is from a particular sample we took from our database of about 38,000 emails. And this will just kind of highlight the importance of follow-ups, which I know many of you are already doing, but I will push even further about some of sort of the new practices here. But what you can see is that the majority of responses across this data set, and this holds true across our global data set as well, the majority of all responses from all emails sent from resource across all customers comes from the second touch or beyond. So the majority of your responses are going to come from your follow-ups, not your first email. Furthermore, the majority of all interested responses also come from follow-up touches and not the first touch. So follow-ups are critical. I know many of you know that. I will talk a little bit in a second about how to think about how many and when to sequence them. Another question that we get asked a lot is, what is the impact or efficacy of sending as somebody else's identity in the company? A popular way that this is done is we will send on behalf of a hiring manager or on behalf of a leader at the company, and then we'll handle the replies as a recruiter. So we will sort of pose as somebody else. What we strongly recommend to keep continuity and authenticity is have that person write and draft that copy, so it's actually their voice, but you handle the work of actually targeting and sending it. We show, based on a similarly sized sample, that there is a little over a 2% swing in effectiveness for doing this. And I will also say that this effectiveness skews more strong when other variables are isolated. And one of those variables that tends to impact the likelihood that this works better or not is your forward-facing brand. And so this is one of the reasons why I think what Reddit is well poised to really win the outreach and subsequently recruiting war, if you will, is because it's a very, very well-known brand for consumers. And therefore doing tactics like this will matter actually less. So the less your brand is recognized, the more impact doing things like send as will work. And so keep this in mind. Brand matters a lot. When I went to Google, I thought that, and I'm sure there are people on the call here from Google who will maybe disagree with me, and I welcome you to share if you have a different perspective. But I had a very high expectation for the level of sophistication that the outreach efforts of Google and Google's sourcing team looked like. And when I got there and saw it, I realized, well, the sophistication isn't there. There's nothing magic happening here. In fact, like these emails that are going out are 2 sentences long. It just says, hey, we're Google, do you want to chat? And after scratching my head for all of about 6 seconds, I realized that when your brand is that well known, you need do nothing interesting to get people interested. Right? You merely need to say who you represent. And that's really most of what was happening. This was quite a long time ago, by the way, so things might have changed. Nice, I've got at least one person agreeing with me. So I think that this is wonderful if you happen to be Google, and I think not many companies have a brand that encroach on that territory. I think Reddit is one of the few, so keep this stuff in mind. Put your energy where it matters. I lost the mouse, and I'm gonna get it back. Oops. All right. Cool. So campaign structure. We're used to, and we've often guided our customers to think about 3 touchpoint campaigns, 3 to 4 days apart, and 1 campaign per role. And I'm going to challenge all of these. Some of the most interesting and effective campaigns that we see are over 6 touchpoints. They run over a 90-day period of time. And the segments for each role are targeted into multiple campaigns. And I can talk about what each of these looks like. So at each touch point after the 3rd, our data shows that your response rates will slightly dip. However, they won't go to 0. So while if you look back here and you see that, for example, the 2nd touch is even higher than the 1st, but we see a dip at the 3rd. This might trail to 6 or 5 or 4 or 3% by your 6th, 7th, 8th touch. But you will be getting candidates into your pipeline at each stage thereafter. And therefore, what we recommend now is building your first campaigns as you likely do, with as 3 or 4 touch points, 3 or 4 days apart. So over the first couple weeks, the candidate is hearing from you. In other words, if there's any interest and willingness to move forward today, you're going to capture that. They're going to see the message. They're going to hear you out. They'll move forward if there is interest. And if there isn't at that point, you want to start staggering your subsequent emails to do work for you for those who haven't responded farther out. So you might wait another 2, 3, or 4 weeks to send your 4th or 5th touch. You might wait a final 30-day gap before you send your 5th or 6th touch. And what you're doing is you're kind of capturing the variable of timing automatically without you having to think about this for those who don't move forward from your initial campaign. And so there's a huge caveat here. One of the worst practices that we see, and one of the most common practices that we see, is follow-ups. I'm going to implicate myself here. So anybody who is doing this, I will tell you that I do this as well, and I have to check myself. Follow-ups that say something along the lines of, I'm just bumping this to the top of your inbox. In other words, you're following up without providing any value. You're actually just being really annoying. And it translates. Candidates will often reply after the 3rd one and say, leave me alone. And you probably see these emails. And so I will posit to you this. If you kind of think about, and we'll talk about copy in a minute, the Reddit story, the reason why you're at Reddit, the things that I as a candidate can get by joining Reddit that I can't get at any other company that I might pick. If we take that narrative and we break it up, and maybe we put half of it, instead of giving away the whole ball of wax in the first email, we put half of it in the first email. That's already probably a lot. You can already differentiate, I'm sure, well enough on that. Well, we're going to take the other 50%, and you want to split that up over 5 or 6 touches. And even if that's providing one new interesting insight, which is the most recent press article or the million videos that Alexis Ohanian is in every other week, or all of the content that gets spit out of the Reddit engine, you more or less have infinity content. Further emphasizing my point that you are in a unique position. And we'll talk about copy in a minute and get more into the details. And then lastly, by targeted campaigns, what I mean is you can actually personalize and segment your groups of candidates that you're reaching out to without actually individually personalizing the message each time. Here's how you do that. If you have a few SWE recs that you're working on, or a specific SWE rec, say it's a senior software engineer for on the East Coast, or just a gen SWE senior software engineer, you might create 2 campaigns. One is for senior SWEs based on the East Coast. This might be a bad example because geography is becoming quickly irrelevant. Let's say those at consumer companies, gen SWEs that you're targeting who are existing at consumer companies, and those who are not. You might create 2 campaigns for that one rec that both feed the same role in Greenhouse. And the messaging for one is highly tailored to SWEs currently at a consumer company. And so instead of dropping them into a generic Gen SWE campaign and personalizing one sentence in the message, you might drop them into the consumer campaign for Gen SWE, and you already have messaging that's tailored specifically to those at consumer companies. And you might drop the remainder into more generic or B2B focused campaign, for example. If you have a generic software engineering role that's not leveled, you might create one for senior folks and one for junior folks. You can kind of get the idea for how we might pick a particular sort of commonality, draft the messaging accordingly. The cool thing with this is there is not a lot of variance in how much you personalize follow-ups, but there is a lot of variance in your efficacy if you personalize the first message. So you really don't need to think about personalizing the follow-ups. Your experiments are largely going to happen on the first outreach. Yes. Yes, I'm just looking at the chat. Exactly. We're starting to follow a lot of paradigms that sales has figured out over the last 10 years, and recruiting, we're starting to get our software ecosystem sort of on par, but we're still trailing a lot, largely because we know HR has been historically looked at as a cost center, and things are starting to change. HR and recruiting are starting to be looked at as forward leaning investment areas, core competitive advantages for our company. And therefore, we're starting to see a lot of the same fundamentals that we might apply to a sales process to recruiting. I used the word marketer in the early parts of the deck. You can probably swap that with sales, though I would say we all might have a slightly different, some preconceived notions about being a salesperson versus a marketer. Another couple data points that are helpful, and these are all low-hanging fruit that many of us kind of forget to do or don't know about, that really move the needle a lot. And so that's where I'm starting. We've seen cases where over half of candidates that did reply and were interested dropped off because they didn't hear back again about next steps that same day. The rule of thumb is when you have an interested candidate, reply within 24 hours. The faster you get back to them and get them scheduled, the more of them will not drop off. The less of them will drop off. Another bit is those candidates who are not interested now, rather, I should reframe. Those candidates who are not interested are just and should be interpreted as not interested now. And this means they might be interested later. And so really thinking about the long tail of your work. We're going to spend a lot of work emailing cohorts of candidates, and a very small portion of them are going to move into our funnel. Let's say sub 10% of them are going to move into my pipeline, but there's 90% of the work that I did where those candidates are not willing or able to move forward today. Start to really think about that pool as likely, and our data shows this as well, that 10% conversion rate that you had on the first effort, you'll see similar to a 10% conversion rate from that same cohort every 3 months or so. So if you reach out to that same cohort within the next 3 months, you'll see almost another 10% of them convert into your pipeline again. Mind you, these are people you've already sourced before. So really play the long game with folks. I mentioned this already, but the content of what you put in your emails probably matters more than almost any other thing that you do. And I challenge recruiters to ask the question, why in the hell would I want to work for you? Like, what? I have presumably a great job. You're reaching out to me cold. I didn't solicit this. I didn't apply. Like, what is the good reason why I should consider this? And the frame of reference that I find helpful is to put yourself in the candidate's shoes. Why are you at Reddit? Why did you join? What persuaded you? What excites you most about working at Reddit and is the core reason that you are not job seeking, presumably right now? And lastly, what might convince you to take a call with another company right now? What would that email have to look like? Another thing that plays to Reddit's advantage is that media matters a lot. So many preconceived notions in sourcing suggest that the shorter, the better. The shorter my email, the better. This, because timing is all that matters. This is a very common belief. This is true in some cases and utterly not true in other cases. I'll show you an example. The more media you can put in each touch point, and Reddit has a lot of it, the better. And don't forget to lean forward with who you are, why you're at Reddit, what you do. Candidates want to see a human behind the outreach. I'm going to give you all a quick example, but just to reiterate, add value in your follow-ups, lean into your strengths as a company who has a ton of content, who has a really strong mission, in evangelical user base and brand. Tell your story, litter your emails with links, use all sorts of cool media, and remember that being different is better. This is the way to get more results. And I'm going to give you a quick example. So this may be a little hard to read, but I have a friend, and I love to use the example. He's a very senior iOS engineer. He runs several iOS apps that he owns in the App Store. He's one of the first 500 developers in the App Store, makes a full income from it, doesn't need a job for income purposes, and is the most, he's very fast to let you know, I ain't interested in a damn job, as he would say all the time. And so he's unrecruitable. I would frame as unrecruitable, yet I will show you an email that he recently got. Well, not recently, this was actually a year and a half or so back, but, and I'll tell you the outcome. So if you want to just kind of skim through this, it's going to kind of span a couple slides. This is an actual email that he received.
What does that chart mean?
So this is the growth in monthly unique visitors of the company that this person's reaching out on behalf of. So they're saying, hey, look, take a look at our growth. This is where we raised our Series A, and this has been our growth since in monthly visitors. And I'm going to continue forward so you can see the rest of the email. Notice how many links are here, and I'll provide color in a minute. And the close. So what bong bong means, I still haven't figured out, but a couple things to note. I will kind of give away the company here. This is a company now called Genius, used to be called Rap Genius. It's a content business that has lyrics for pretty much every song on earth, and the artists sometimes go in and annotate those lyrics and explain them. So they have a lot of content. So they link to a lot of Rap Genius pages where there's really cool examples from their own site of like awesome stuff that goes down on it. And I think this is a great example for Reddit because you have a ton of content, a trove of content where there's really cool forward mission driven, social change driven. I mean, every type of thing is happening on Reddit, and you can build some amazing messaging by linking out some awesome stuff and really leaning into why working for a company that's enabling this stuff is so cool. Another reason I share this example is because this email is very long, and many people's intuitions tell you that a short email doesn't work, or a long email doesn't work. Another reason I share this email is because my unrecruitable friend would take a full-time job with this company after receiving this email. And as he told me, I'm going to get a coffee. I'm definitely not taking the job. And what got him to take that coffee? Well, if you see, the person reaching out said, I'd be thrilled to meet you, even if there's a 0% chance you're moving jobs anytime soon. He didn't know it at the time, but this was more or less the sentence that got my friend. He felt comfortable and safe, like he was not going to get pressured into the next step immediately. And simply because he didn't feel pressure, he took the meeting, and during the meeting was persuaded it was worth another. And so one other point I want to make is that your outreach emails are not, the goal of your outreach emails is not to convince somebody to come work for Reddit. The goal of your outreach emails is simply and only to get the person on the other end to take the next step. That's it. The phone screen, the recruiter screen, whatever that next step is, that is the entirety of your goal. And then the next step you design to convert to the next step, and so on. So quickly, I'm gonna find my mouse again so I can see this chat. There's a question of, do we have data on response rates segmented by gender? We do not. There's several reasons why we don't pull data like that, but yeah, the short answer is we don't. So lastly, before we sort of open up workshop a little bit, I want to share some of our new tools that solve for a lot of this. So there is a lot you can do with email, as you see. But there really is something that we're finding to work better. And I'm going to share a little bit of a surprise, which is a part of this product that's designed for source and recruiters that we are really launching today. You are the first team that we're going to show this. And I want you all to just quickly meet and get to know Guide. And Guide is our new product, which brings the candidate experience out of your email and onto the web. Well, why do I care about that? Well, email can only do so much. Web pages can do a lot more. And so what we're doing with links like you see, instead of linking out to 10 different properties, we're really bringing a lot of content that you first design and can create around the Reddit brand and links and media that is unique to Reddit, and create one link for the candidate to have an experience. They link out from your email, and I'll share a little more, but what's most kind of important to understand is once a candidate links out of the email, we can highly personalize an experience for them. So this is a product that we're working closely with the Reddit RC team with. We've been in a pilot together for the last quarter or so, building this together. And what Guide is it's a rich interview guide that brings candidates through a very personalized experience at every step of the interview. And so as you move a candidate from one greenhouse stage to another, this guide updates them from the stage they're currently on to the next stage, and then unlocks new content that's specifically designed for the candidate to prepare and understand what this current stage that they're at looks like. We will show you the interview team, the interviewers, bios, the schedule, the values of Reddit, the mission, and whatever else you choose to design. This is all just served through a unique link we generate automatically. You send to the candidate and the candidate moves through. And what we're seeing is that the more that these are shared, the more likely a candidate is to convert at each step. Largely, thus far, the hypothesis is that the more information is shared, the more transparently, the more likely it is folks convert. More specifically, the more likely it is the right folks convert, because often we know transparency is polarizing. When candidates learn a lot more, they might actually decide this isn't a fit and self-select out. That's largely a good thing for recruiting teams. It will save you a lot of time. But how is this relevant to sourcers and recruiters? We just built a version of this, which enables personalized scheduling pages for recruiters and sourcers. So this is built specifically for the top of the funnel to impact and differentiate your initial outreach. And I'll share very quickly how this works. So in our new product guide, and I can share access to all of this, this will be released, I think, either during this call or after this call into Reddit's account. We have a brand new feature called the scheduler. And very similar to using something like Calendly, as a recruiter or sourcer, I can create a link that has all my preferences about my calendar, which calendar I want to book on, my hours that I want to make available, branding, and so on. And so you can create several of these depending on the use case. I have one for phone interviews, I have one for demos, and so on. And then you get to design your own personal page. And you can put whatever you want on this page. This is going to be wrapped in Reddit's brand. You can add several modules to add a video or links or text. But basically, when the candidate gets this page, which you can include in your sourcing emails or your subsequent conversation over email, you just create these unique links and you share with the candidate. They're going to get a link like this, which shares a lot more transparent, rich information about Reddit. And perhaps you might put your bio at the top, and they could book their first or next phone screen right on your calendar or the hiring manager and so on. So we've made these links really easy for recruiters and sourcers. And the use case that we're testing here is when a link like this is included in my sourcing or subsequent emails, hey candidate, we love your background. If you're interested in chatting, click this link to learn a little bit more about us and book a time on my calendar that works for you if you're interested in chatting. This gives the candidate a lot of flexibility and autonomy to look around and understand what they're opting into before they opt in without having to go do their own research on the web. Again, I think this is really advantageous for Reddit because I think you have a very strong brand. Candidates might simply be wondering, what is it like to work at Reddit? I know what Reddit is like. I know what Reddit is as a product, but what might it be like to work there? And this is a page that you might use to highlight that. As I mentioned, these are simple to create, and there's various ways you can use them, but I won't spend too much time on them here, but we'll share more info after the call. This is completely, this will be completely available, and in your account, I'll put Jenna on the spot. Jenna is very familiar with all of this, probably knows this product better than I do at this point, but she can help me after this call point you all in the right direction to getting access to this and testing this out. Mind you, we will be making very quick iterations and improvements, this based on your feedback. So we have a Slack channel shared with your company between Reddit and Resource that you're welcome to join. Jenna can also help there and share any nitpicks, feedback. If it only did this, this would be amazing. We will get that stuff in very quickly just for you. So this is just a quick primer. I'm going to go ahead and stop and spend the remaining time on any opening questions and follow-ups if there's anything further to dig into.
Hey, Troy, quick question. Will the scheduling component on the new functionality, will that integrate into Greenhouse as well?
Yeah, so we'll share a little bit more, perhaps with some quick Loom videos that you all can kind of understand the technicalities, but your team in particular is using these guides for candidates mid-funnel. So when a candidate gets past the first few screens, the recruiting coordination team is sending them a guide that shows them all the stages of the interview, where they're at, and so on. Those are specific to the candidate. This new scheduling page is specific to you as the recruiter or sourcer. You create one it's just for you. And so it's not a guide for the candidate yet. However, when you send it to a candidate, if that candidate's already in your greenhouse via the outreach you're doing with Resource, for example, like they're a prospect, how this is going to work within the next few days is once they book on your calendar, we have their data because they're giving it to us, their email, their name, when they book your calendar. We're going to do a quick lookup to see if they exist in Greenhouse. And if they do, we automatically generate them a guide on the fly and redirect them to that page. So now they can see, okay, here's who I'm meeting with, your profile, and so on. And if that is true, we automatically book the interview in Greenhouse for you, and we automatically put it on your calendar. So all of this just happens automatically once the candidate books. The other side of the coin or answer is if the candidate doesn't exist at all in your Greenhouse, that won't happen. So once they're in Greenhouse, we can automate all of the calendaring and interview bookings in Greenhouse, but it won't happen until they're there.
Got it. Thank you.
More to come on that particular piece. That's a great question. This is a brand new product, but we're aiming over the next week or two for this to be perfectly continuous. So even in the case where the candidate's not a candidate, we might be able to auto create a prospect with their info. At the end of the day, we want you not to have to think about any of these things you're doing manually, and let that be driven by the data that we have.
Yeah, and the reason why I was asking is obviously we as recruiters, when we are doing a screen or a touch point, we are filling out that scorecard that lives in Greenhouse as the source of truth. So making sure we have that functionality where it does give you that ability to create the actual scorecard and fill it out without having to go back and recreate that process in Greenhouse, I think would be very time saving for recruiters and sourcers as we go through this process.
Yeah, that's interesting. I may reach out at some point or have our product team reach out to better understand that use case, because getting a handle on the specifics there could potentially be aligned with some things that we can build for that case. I haven't heard that before. It's great. Any other questions or commentary that's coming up? Any disagreements or anecdotes that suggest otherwise than what I shared?
I have a quick question on the dashboard, like on the main resource page.
Yep.
I'm wondering if like right now you can search for specific candidates, but you can't search for specific campaigns. I'm wondering if that's going to change, and also if you will ever be able to like organize the campaigns by most recent or by the sender. Just like it would be good to have some different indexing features on that main dashboard. That's been a pain point for me so far.
Great question. So this may be a little unobvious, but you can search by campaign by just clicking this button. I'm not sure if that was obvious. And so, yep. And then, so just FYI on that, that's our bad. Some of these design things are just hard to catch. And then you can also click on any of these rows to sort by this. So you can click on, like, if I want to sort by number sourced, I just click that and it sorts by that count.
Can you sort by sender?
You cannot sort by sender. This is the only one that you can't sort by. Same, you can sort by name now. Status is the other. Sender and status you can't. But what you can do inside of our network tab, I don't know if this solves your problem, but you can just pull all campaigns by the name, you know, X.
That works.
Great. Any other sort of suggestions, pain points, feature requests with the core outreach workflow?
So in the insights area, I noticed, and maybe I'm doing something wrong, but when you go into just the general insights tab and say, you know, just look at everybody who's done sourcing over the last 90 days, down under by teammate, it says by teammate, and then you can actually like sort there. If I sort it once, it will show like kind of who's sent the most reach outs, but it's like, at least my view right now, there's someone who's done 666, then 577, then 364, then 407. Like, I don't understand how it's being sorted there. So I can sort the other way, and it's 0, 1, 104, 12, 12, 12, 12, 122, 126, 122, 109, and then 13. Like, I don't understand the sorting and what's happening there.
Is this the row that you're referring to?
Yeah. Or contact, I'm doing contacted, but same idea. It like gives a very odd number sorting. So yours, yours is kind of looks like it's working, but mine is not. It's okay for like a couple lines, except for when I do contacted like least to most. I'm seeing it does like a 3 rows before it gets wonky.
I think I just caught the same bug.
Yeah, the column doesn't have a pure number, Troy. So the data stack is messy because source is the only column that should let us sort by here because it doesn't have a percentile. So I'll report it and see if we can clean up. There's an option in the future for us to clean this up. It's definitely failing because of the percentage column mixture.
Cool, thank you.
Sorry about that, Josh.
No worries.
Thanks for.
And then can we talk about the other grouping of campaigns as well? So like say I send like I'm A/B testing 3 different campaigns. How do I see data for just my entire process?
Yeah, so the way that I would do that currently is I would just pull those 3 campaigns here. And then I would run the report based on those 3 and compare the data here. In this case, these 3 campaigns I selected may or may not have data associated with them. But basically the whole dashboard will rearrange for the data for just these 3 campaigns. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, that works for me.
Yep. It's also a little bit of a design quirk that it's unobvious that you can add multiple selections to each of these. So that should solve your problem. Ping us for sure if not.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've only been in here a couple of days now at this point, so cool. I'm excited to keep learning more of these and finding these little things. So thanks for showing me.
Anytime. We are just on time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. As I mentioned, one, just thank you for your attention for such a long hour. I hope some of this was useful. We can go a lot deeper in any of these directions. I'm always welcome. I welcome and we're available to do this again. And as mentioned, I will share the recording of this with you so you can reference it. I will also share the deck so you have that as well. If anything else comes up, I will also, lastly, I will be sharing in our Slack channel. And this could be passed along or you can be added more information on how to access and test. You will be at the first team besides our team inside the new recruiter scheduler pages. So anybody who's interested in trying those and building your own personal links, we'd love to get you in and hear your feedback. So more to come on that. Thank you all so much. We will do this again shortly. It was great to see a bunch of new faces and some familiar ones. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.